Hi, everyone, and welcome to this installment of the Wildcat Chat. Thanks so much for participating today. The Wildcat Chat series began in the summer of 2020, last summer, as a way to communicate K-State topics of interest to our alumni and friends across the globe. We opened the series a year ago with these same leaders in June of last year and have now held 10 Wildcat Chats. We've been able to share parts of campus with nearly 4,000 K-Staters through these virtual events. My name is Travis Lenkner. I'm a 2001 graduate of the journalism school at K-State and now an attorney in Chicago and a former chair of the Alumni Association Board of Directors. Really pleased to be asked to return with the rest of this esteemed group this afternoon to talk through some of the biggest issues at K-State that we know so many alumni and friends of the university want to know about. We appreciate the many questions that we got from all of you during the registration process, and we'll do our best to answer those questions during this event. And also feel free to drop questions and comments into the live chat at any point, and we'll do our best to get to those as we go through. I want to go ahead and introduce our three panelists, all of whom will be well known to you. First, the president of K-State, General Richard Myers, the Provost and Executive Vice President, Chuck Tabor, and the K-State Alumni Association President and CEO, Amy Button Renz. Hello to all of you. Welcome back. I feel like we did such a great job last time that they've asked us all back. The three of you would naturally get to come back. It's a little stranger for me that I get to do this a second time, but I guess that means we pulled it off the first time successfully. So great to see you all again. And we'll try to get through as many questions as we can over the next 45 minutes or so. I want to start with the topic of COVID. A lot of questions that we received in advance of today, and we've tried to condense those into a few that will let you all address this topic. But during the last year and a half, K-State has gone through a multi-phase plan to keep the university community safe during the pandemic. And of course, precautions are still being taken. But this fall, K-State was able to welcome students back to an in-person learning environment. So just a general question to get us started and to throw it out to all three of you, and maybe President Myers, if you want to kick off, just give us your reflection on the last 18 months and now your sense of the overall feel and emotion in Manhattan and on campus at the start of the school year.
Thank you, Travis, and hi to everybody on the call. Just delighted to be with you. There are lots of emotions, probably for lots of people around the pandemic. But the first thought is the team here at K-State and the Manhattan community, I think, really dealt with the pandemic in a very serious, mature, and professional way. Our bedrock was the CDC guidance always, and then county and state guidance if it was more stringent. We had a great team that worked multiple times a week trying to figure out what protocols and policies ought to be implemented. And so, March of 2020, we turned on a dime to go all virtual. You can imagine there's a lot of faculty that said, oh, good, I'm ready for this. There was a lot of faculty that said, what? How do I do this? Where's the help? And so, but in a week, everything went online and students were able to continue their education and graduate on time if they were going to graduate that May. So that's one of the thoughts. The other is that now we're open, people are on campus. We do require masks indoors, but campus is alive again for the first time since March of 20, and it's just delightful to be here. Emotions, I think, are still pretty raw as people try to figure out the impact of the pandemic on employment, on the economy, on their personal financial well-being, and just tired of dealing with it and tired of being out of things because supply chains were disrupted. So I think there's an angst out there because we're still dealing with it. It hasn't gone away. It looks like it's waning now. That's the good news. And then there are those that were hurt by it, of course, who lost loved ones or whose loved ones or family members were laid off. So I think it's a mix of emotions. Generally, on campus, I think people are very positive. I think we dealt with it well. Financially, we came out of it in really good shape because we took some steps early on to continue to keep us financially viable. We didn't have to make any budget cuts this year to to campus. It's the first year in the last 4 or so that we've been able to do that. So I feel pretty good about where we are at this point. And I think the pandemic has helped focus our minds on some important issues. We can talk about that later.
Sure. Provost Tabor, maybe a specific follow-up for you in addition to reflections would just be, can you give everybody a super high level on just the current COVID precautions and the status on vaccinations for the campus community, as well as your broader thoughts?
So that question, I think, is one for President Myers. That was yeah. But in terms of my reflections, I did want to share that, like President Myers, I'm very proud of our community, our students, our faculty, staff. This was just, I mean, we say it so much that we're tired of hearing it, but it was such an extraordinary time. It has been, and it still is to some degree, but now we're back. And I do want to share that emotions are high, and a lot of them are so positive. I was at an event the other night where, for the first time in 2 years, we were able to celebrate in person the promotion and tenure of our faculty for the last 2 years. And so we had several hundred faculty who had been promoted over the last 2 years in the room. And I spoke with several faculty, there were tears in their eyes about the opportunity to come together and celebrate this incredible personal, but also institutional milestone for them. That's just one example, but there are so many incredible emotions right now as we come back from the previous 18 months.
Absolutely. And Amy, of course, you're getting the visibility at now events starting to open up, football games with people returning to Manhattan as well. So give us a sense, the university community, both in Manhattan and also just more broadly, your sense of campus and the alumni as well.
Well, Travis, I appreciate that question. And I'm really so proud of our staff. And 2 words really come to mind: resilient and creative. We had to completely pivot, go away from in-person events to obviously Wildcat chats. And it's fun to be back with all of you because this was our first one. And then Wildcat Reads with Coach Schneider, Mary Jo Myers, and Dean Mercer and others. So we really had to change our programming. But what was really nice, and I think virtual is here to stay, is we no longer have geographic boundaries. We don't have to say we're going to Pratt, Kansas City, Chicago. We can, bring people from all over the country and the world into the virtual events that we'll continue to have, or we can offer both. But it's been so good to be back in person. And like Provost Tabor said, just being back, I was with a group of student leaders from student government a few weeks ago, and it just felt so good to have students back in the building and to be able to travel to events. We had an event in Ottawa, Kansas, and it was just fun. People have missed out on that for the last 18 months. We had to be that way to be safe. But I think moving forward, we're going to see a lot of high participation in many of the events that we weren't able to hold over the last 2 years.
That's great. And you've all described people returning to campus. And so to put it back to you, Mr. President, just a quick summary of how that's working. You mentioned masks indoors, vaccination status for the campus community, and anything else to share, just kind of high level details on where you are COVID specifically right now.
Sure, Travis. The CDC measures each county in the United States and categorizes them as either high, substantial, or moderate. And then there are a couple of lower categories in terms of the transmission of the virus in those respective counties. So Raleigh County's been in the substantial category, which is, the high, which is the highest category, then substantial, where we are right now. And we're trending towards moderate. CDC recommends that when you're in high or substantial, that you wear mask indoors. And so that's what we went to when students and faculty staff returned to campus full-time this fall. So right now, masks aren't required outdoors. They're not required at the football stadium. But if you're indoors, you should wear a mask. You should physically distance. You should still worry about hand sanitation. And in addition to that, we started this a long time ago with some of the federal COVID money, which is redoing some of our ventilation systems that were not up to standards to help have the proper ventilation to help mitigate the virus. So we have the four things I've mentioned there have all helped us, I think, keep the virus at bay. We have not had a point on campus that's ever been a super spreader event, to include our athletic venues. So we feel pretty confident we're doing the right thing. Vaccination rates, to me, are a little disappointing, but they're in the low to mid 60s for students and low to mid 60s for faculty and staff. We have incentives, laptops, all kinds of neat gear for people that want to put their name in the lottery after they've had both their vaccinations. So, and that's for faculty and staff and for students, and they are participating. And the final thing I'd say is that Lafayette and is still offering free vaccinations, of course, and they do clinics, and sometimes in the residence halls, sometimes in the dining centers. They try to go where the customers are, and testing is still free. Symptomatic, asymptomatic testing is free, available with very quick turnaround, as it has been during the pandemic for those of us on the K-State campus. So that's an update, and we'll see where this goes. The trend lines are looking good now, so it could be in another couple of weeks we could remove the mask mandate, but we haven't made that decision yet. We haven't even considered that at this point because we're still in the substantial category. And you can go on the CDC website and see this, and you can go into your county and see what the transmission rate is in your particular county.
So as a way to use COVID and appreciate those specifics, and maybe to transition now to a little more general and start to talk about some other areas of important things going on at the university. How do you, President Myers and Provost Tabor, think that the pandemic has influenced the university's priorities more broadly? And feel free to use that as a stepping stone to other things you may want to cover. And then I know we have some other topics to get to as well. But what has COVID done to shift at a more strategic level where the university goes from here?
Well, I'll jump in. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Chuck. Yep, go ahead.
I'll jump in first. The primary thing it's done is it's accelerated some of the changes in higher education and on our campus. We talked throughout COVID, and I probably said this phrase earlier to you, that we were really thinking all through COVID about the pivot to the future at the university. I love this question because it allows us to talk about this pivot to the future. We need to, and we are coming out of COVID ready for a very different future, a future landscape of higher education, where you have more flexible programs, where the universities like K-State, and K-State's going to be at the forefront of this, are able to deliver micro credentials, badges, as well as our regular degree offerings to a wide variety of different types of people. So we'll be serving people at all age levels and all different sorts of places. I think we'll have direct service for alumni in terms of education, future educational offerings that'll be really important. These are all big changes in the landscape of higher ed, and we've positioned ourselves to really be aggressive in moving in those directions. Across the university, faculty and administrators in the colleges are thinking about how they can work, sometimes with industry partners, sometimes just working, in areas where they know they have expertise and there's a competencies to be delivered, how they can offer these new types of credentials. This is also happening on both the Salina and Olathe campuses. So that's one huge emphasis that we had already been talking about under the heading academic innovation before COVID, but it's been accelerated by COVID. And I'm really excited about this. President Myers can talk about a lot of other things. We're continuing some of our ongoing initiatives like food, health, biosecurity, things along those lines. A cyber land grant, I've probably talked with you before, but I know President Myers has some thoughts in all these areas as well. So I'm going to stop and pass it to him.
Well, thank you, Chuck. And I'll go up to 30,000 feet and just say, what the pandemic really did was provide a sense of urgency to start our transformation, that pivot to the future that Chuck talked about. That's really helpful to have that as backdrop, because looking at the budget picture when COVID first hit, and we lost $100 million that first year, in revenue. What a blow to the university. And to deal with that and get ready for the future, there was a sense of urgency. We don't want to go through this again. And basically it's I don't think academia gets a lot of credit for being very agile or flexible in general. And K-State's not a whole lot different than that. But what Chuck is describing is trying to be more agile and flexible as we serve the needs of students, industry, the world with the talent we produce here. And I think we're on a good path to doing that. We have several things underway that I think are easier to implement, to do, because the pandemic gave us that sense of urgency and a peek into what life could be like if we're not as agile and flexible as we need to be, and to see what others are doing. So I feel, I don't think we're ever comfortable. I feel pretty good about where we are right now. We have a lot more work to do along the lines that Chuck just said. And I'm going to stick in an unpaid political announcement. If those of you not been watching or reading, our Salina campus recently rebranded. It's K-State Salina, and then the smaller print is Aerospace and Technology Campus. The word is aerospace and technology, not K-State Polytechnic or any of that. Polytechnic is it's been buried in Sunrise Cemetery here, and I'm not going to tell you where because we don't want anybody to dig it up. So that not necessarily COVID related, but I think everybody realized during COVID there's some taking opportunities to move forward, and that certainly moves Salina forward. So I'll leave with that.
Absolutely, and to talk about even some of the other changes that I know have happened, some put in place, or the beginnings of them put in place before COVID, is maybe to shift to enrollment, which is also a current topic in that we're early in the new academic year, and people always want to know how enrollment is looking. So, Provost Tabor, how is enrollment looking for the semester?
So I have to say, we've just unveiled our 20th day numbers internally. We're not allowed to share them quite yet, but I can talk about what's happening. And it is a lot of good news in this report. I'm really excited about this. And we can see a lot of evidence in the report of the things we've done in strategic enrollment management really working. So this was the highest graduation rate in recent history at the university. So we had a very successful period for student success in the last several years, which yielded great graduation rates. On the 6-year rate, we're the highest in Kansas. On the first year to second year retention, we're the highest in Kansas. We're beating national averages on some of these student success rates as well. So we're really moving in a great direction on those student success metrics. One of the things that means is that we're graduating larger classes every year. And this was no exception. We graduated a large class this year. That means every time you graduate a large class, you have to bring in an even larger freshman class, right? So the other side of the equation is, how are we doing on recruitment? And the news there is that we saw this year increases in transfer students, increases in K-State Salina, graduate students, new international students, lots of good news across that. Our out-of-state freshmen are pretty much flat, and the in-state freshman class is slightly down this year. The overall mix there is that we're really pretty close to flat and very slightly down this year in overall enrollment. But we continue to see all these great markers of where we're going, picking up. I may have shared with you before, but it's becoming even more pronounced that top end of the funnel, the number of applications to the university. There's probably no better indicator of interest in Kansas State University than the number of kids who apply, right? And we started at a very low number at K-State, and that's because our strategies were focused in-state largely in the past, and we've expanded that with our new strategic enrollment management project. And we're getting great numbers of applications. We were up last year. We're up even more, way more this year in applications. And now that we're getting applicants on campus with their families for visits, we're going to be yielding those applications in higher numbers. So I feel really, really confident about where we're going in turning around this battleship, which will take several years to do. But we're now seeing real clear evidence of the things that we're doing turning around.
So a couple of, oh, go ahead.
Let me just emphasize one thing, and that is that as Chuck alluded to there, COVID hurt us a lot because the way you get students to sign up at K-State is to get them here for a campus visit. And during the pandemic, we had very few in-person campus visits. And a virtual visit to Manhattan or to campus is not as good as and probably a lot of the alumni out there would agree with that. You got to get here. And then you find out you've got a caring faculty, staff, a great community, on and on. Once you get here, you say, wow, what a beautiful place. Gee, I like the professors I talked to, that sort of thing. Well, we couldn't do that last fall and last spring in the numbers that we would have liked to. So we are now, and just driving around campus on almost any given day, there are large groups taking tours in person, which is, I think, key to capitalizing on our huge increase in applications and our huge increase in admits that we had last year. So I just add that.
Yeah, that's exactly right. We're setting records right now in student visits, and we're in fact increased the capacity and the frequency of student visits to accommodate that.
And Amy, to bring you into this enrollment conversation as well, I know the association, the Alumni Association, and our alumni more broadly have long been an important component in student recruitment. President Myers alluded to it. You know, part of that imparting that feeling of what it's like to be on campus and helping talk to prospective students about the benefits of K-State and what it's like to be part of this community. Can you share a little more about your office's role, what the association does, and maybe how alumni who might be watching this chat can get involved if they're interested in the recruitment efforts?
Thank you, Travis. And that's a great question, and we're asked that a lot. I am pleased to share that the Alumni Association Board of Directors has made this a priority since the 1980s, and it's something that our staff really relishes the opportunity to work with campus. We've had quite a few meetings over the last year and a half with Karen Goose, who is our new Vice Provost for Enrollment Management, and we're following her lead and tweaking and making sure that the efforts that we do have out there with alumni are supporting what the university needs to have happen. We're continuing to invite prospective students and transfer students to our alumni events. That's just started up. And in fact, we invited prospective students and their parents to the pregame that was held in Texas Live before the K-State game against Stanford. We also will continue to be very actively involved in working with our alumni clubs to share names of individuals that will be interested in K-State. I think what I would like to just share with everybody on this Zoom call today is if you know of a student that might be interested in K-State, be sure and share that name with us. We'll make sure it gets to the admissions office and they can begin the recruitment process. And President Myers is right. We need to get people on campus. Our campus sells itself. And I think that'll be very important over the next year. And alumni should tell their story. If you meet a prospective student, or if you know a student in your neighborhood, or a son or a daughter of someone that you work with, be sure and tell your K-State story, because that's what sells K-State more than anything. We're all very proud of the K-State family, and we need to share that story with everyone.
So just really fast, another of these, I'll do an unpaid advertisement now to follow on the presidents from before and ask you, Amy, to talk just very briefly about the license plate program, because another important part of recruitment is scholarships. I know it was for me, and it is for a lot of our current students and prospective students. Just give some high level on the scholarship dollars that came in last year. I think more than $500,000 for scholarships. What is that program? Who benefits, and how can people be a part of it?
Well, the scholarship program is another priority of the association. And what was truly amazing this past year, we gave out more scholarships. We gave out $500,000 the year before, $550,000. And you would have thought during the pandemic, some of that would have slowed down. But we have the #1 affinity plate in the state of Kansas. That's the #1 affinity plate of all plates for any educational institution or any other areas that might have a license plate. And that license plate has raised over $5.5 million off of a $50 donation. And this past year, we awarded 200 $1,000 scholarships. So that's very, very important. We also have a plate in Texas, one in Maryland, and we may soon have a plate in the state of Oklahoma. A lot of the states have very strict restrictions on what you can do to be able to have enough people to sign up for the plate, or you have to pay a fee up front. And so right now we're continuing to explore what states that might be possible in, and Oklahoma would be the other one. But we're very proud of the license plate scholarship, and it's a legacy scholarship. So children and grandchildren of K-Staters, when they fill out that scholarship application, need to check that box, and that's all you have to do to make yourself eligible.
So, President Myers, speaking of things going on in Texas and Oklahoma, let's talk about the Big 12. That was my segue. Questions on that, obviously coming in fairly strong in advance of this major topic of interest for alumni. So we'll just throw it over to you to share your thoughts and insight on the recent conference realignment.
Well, I think everybody knows the news by now. So the expansion of the Big 12 conference, you consider schools based on their academic reputation and the quality of their football program. Football accounts for 80% of revenue from ESPN and Fox and those kind of places. Men's basketball is about 20%. Everybody else costs you money. So those two get some revenue. And so you look for universities that have good football programs traditionally. And the four we picked are the pick of the group right now, top of the group in all those categories. And there wasn't much debate, frankly, about those four. They were all very eager to join with us, very eager, and they're in the process of paying us some money and signing some letters and contracts and so forth. So we're moving ahead. We're not sure when it is the first time you'll see them on a Big 12 athletic calendar, but it could be as early as 23 for some. It'll be 24 for probably the rest of them. And right now, it looks like Oklahoma and Texas at this point are going to stay with us through the end of our media contract, which ends in 24, 25. So, I mean, they could elect to leave early. That would cost them a lot of money if they did that. So right now they are at least plan for the short term here to be with us, and which I mean, we'll have a pretty robust schedule. Are we going to have two divisions and all that? All to be determined, probably, but that's yet to be determined. We're pretty pleased with where we are and the rapidity with which we did it, given that Texas and Oklahoma leaving was a complete surprise. Was nobody anticipated that? Nobody knew about it. So that's where we are. We feel pretty good about where we are.
Is there from your perspective, having been involved in all the conference meetings and seen this landscape now over several years, is there a stability point that's reached at some point here? I mean, people are excited about these new 4 members of the conference. I think it's a great thing for the Big 12. How can alumni help by turning on TVs and attending games? And what other things can we all do to be a part of, maybe to the extent things can be locked in this world of college athletics, having a stable platform for a long time?
I think we're walking into an era of instability, given that there's questions. There's some work being done on the NCAA's constitution, and it could have that work could have a major impact on what the NCAA is going future here in the near term. That could have a big impact on all Division I schools. We're not sure where that's going, but that's one factor that has got a lot of uncertainty around it. The other one is all the media contracts are up for renegotiation here in the next 4 years, roughly. So there's still a lot of uncertainty around all of that. And is there room for more mischief? Yes, for sure. So I think the best thing we can do is, and where alumni can help, we've got to make sure that our brand is, because we're in a small media market, is as strong as it can be. We have great athletic facilities. That will never be a question. We have generally pretty competitive teams. That won't be a real issue. Other things around the brand that could be helped. support the university in certain ways would certainly burnish that brand. And that's what we need to think about, because it is about our brand. So talking up K-State, talking up the brand to people of influence around the country is always a good thing to do to help us is if we get into more competitions on where we might go or who might want us. We're good for now. I just pointed out two things of the NCAA and the media contracts, which are all be redone here in the next several years. And that could create more stability. It could create more instability. Nobody knows or wants to predict right now, or could predict right now.
Sure. Well, Amy, speaking of the brand and as it relates to the conference landscape, I know being number one in the Big 12 for the percentage of graduates who join the Alumni Association is a huge bragging right for K-State. What does the competition look like now that we're in a new and different group? I know that's a big part of carrying that brand externally, and then nationally and around the world is Alumni Association membership.
Well, and we're very proud of the fact too that we've been number one for over 25 years. So that's very exciting. But I have to admit, when I heard who the 4 new schools were going to be, I immediately checked information, and I knew 3 of the 4 alumni directors, my counterparts, and we're not going to have any difficulty remaining number one. But I encourage people that aren't members to join. It really does make a difference. We talked about the license plate program just a minute ago, and financial aid makes the final decision. But one of the factors is if you're a member of the Alumni Association, your child or grandchild would be given preferential treatment as far as being considered, because obviously we have probably 1,500 people checking that box and only 200 scholarships right now. But membership is something that I think will continue to be very strong as the other 4 universities join the Big 12.
Great, thank you. Provost Tabor and President Myers, switching gears a little bit and talking again about the university more broadly than just athletics and forward-looking. I think a lot of people, particularly those who would be joining us for an event like this and care a lot about current events at the university, will be very familiar with K-State 2025, the strategic plan that was launched in 2010 and set some really ambitious goals, pushing K-State to be a top 50 public research university. Blink your eyes a couple times, it's 2021, and we're nearing the year 2025. And so, the way these things go, it's already time to assess and start thinking about what the plan would be going forward from there. So what are the future plans and goals for the university? And are you laying those against the goals that were set in 2010? And how do we kind of move forward into that next framework of looking toward the future?
Chuck, if you want me to, I can start. I would just, first of all, you've got to have a plan, or any road will lead you anywhere, right? So we had a plan. It was very effective. We've made great progress despite reductions in state funding, despite reduced enrollment. The things we've done under that plan, 2025, are remarkable for any university. And we set goals, we measured things. We had every year the provost and I would go around to the various units and departments and colleges and review all that. A very robust process. We thought we would have a refreshed 2025 by now, but the pandemic stalled all that. So where we are now is we're going to live with 2025 in its current form, and we're starting to set the groundwork for the next plan, which the next president will be able to husband and nurture through the process. So we've already gathered some input for that from colleges and other units, departments. And so we kind of know what part of that will be, but it has not taken form. This plan, 2025, was a plan that involved everybody on campus. The new one will as well. It'll probably have a time horizon of 10 years or something. That'll be determined by the new president. But I think people can be proud that we had a plan. Kirk Schultz and April Mason helped put that together with the rest of the campus. It's really stood us in good stead. One of the things it did was lead to our $1.6 billion capital campaign, the Innovation Inspiration Campaign. If it wasn't for the plan, those kind of numbers would never have been realized. So we feel really good about what that was. And then Chuck and I are starting to gear up for the future, trying to lay the foundation for the next leader to come in and start working on the new plan.
And I think a very good place to start in thinking about that future is where we were going with the refresh, because I think that set a foundation of a sort of a set of initiatives that we thought were important to the university. Just very briefly, we pointed to four initiatives. Food, health, biosecurity, which is an area that will involve a lot of economic development, partnership with industry in those areas, as well as research and education on campus. The cyber land grant idea, which is the idea that we really use technology to further the mission of a land grant university at K-State, become the nation's first fully technologically sophisticated land grant university. So that's a very aspirational goal, but one we're already making some progress in. A third one I mentioned earlier, it's all the stuff around credentials and things like that, the academic innovation, and that's just remaking our educational offerings. And then the fourth one was the aviation initiative, which is centered in the Salina campus, but really involves the other colleges here in Manhattan as well. And I just add a fifth one to that we've really been working hard on over the last few years, and that's diversity and inclusion at the university across all levels, students, staff, faculty, becoming an inclusive university where all belong. We have made a lot of progress, but that's going to be, I think, an important area for us going forward as well.
Just two super short follow-ups on that. And I know initiatives that some have been discussed for a long time that are either online or very close to coming online. Would just ask one of you to really quickly talk about the Multicultural Center that I believe is now open on campus at the Student Union, as well as I feel like in these kinds of settings we've been asking for 10 years, when will that NBAF come online? And I think we're actually rounding third toward a point where there might be a date. So those are very different things to ask about, a compound question, but maybe just quickly touching on both of those that I know interest a lot of people.
Well, the Multicultural Center is open. If you haven't been here to see it, it's one of only a couple standalone multicultural centers in the Big 12. It's certainly the newest. It's connected to the Union, which is one of the hearts of the university. I'd say the other heart, we're a two-heart animal. The other heart would be the library, of course, which we don't mention much anymore, but $92 million renovation has made it a spectacular facility. It was spectacular before, but we've just redone it all inside, thanks to the insurance from the fire and the water damage. It's spectacular, and students are once again in it and love it. So I think that's where we are on that. What was the other topic, Travis? I got off.
Just NBAF date.
NBAF opens 22, fully operational sometime in 2023. We just had 7 legislators, 6 of the Board of Regents there to remind them what the state put into that facility. It's already starting to attract companies, has been for a while. Just the fact that it's there, as we thought it would, as the consultant said, by 2035, we should have 5,000 new jobs that are attracted because of NBAF's presence. To have a big national laboratory literally in your backyard is a huge advantage for us here in K-State. And we're starting to realize that advantage right now. And you'll see all this play out as you see different companies wanting to come here and establish themselves and bring lots of people or facilities with them. So this is really exciting. Yes, it's taken a long time. It's taken an awful long time, but the inside of the building is essentially finished. They're now just checking out all the systems to make sure the bad stuff stays inside. And so that takes a lot of careful checking and double checking.
So President Myers, again, people who are following developments at the university level, no doubt know that you've announced your upcoming retirement from the role. And I was privileged to serve on the Presidential Search Committee in 2016, working with the Board of Regents that hired President Myers. Knew him from other university service and committees and all the ways that he had been involved in K-State over the years, including during my time as a student and an alumnus. And of course, he'd been serving in the interim role as the president at K-State after the departure of Kirk Schultz. And from that experience, I would just say being in the room with the door closed in a confidential search with a search firm that cast a very wide net. Nationally, we saw a too large pool of candidates. We saw a huge pool of candidates, some of whom were already presidents at very real, household name institutions, and many others of whom since 2016 have gone on to be presidents at very significant institutions elsewhere across the country. And, it became clear to all of us during that very rigorous process in a lot of anonymous conference rooms near the airport in Kansas City, as all these candidates were coming in, that we really had the best person already right in front of us, who was just not only the natural person for the role, but who had just had a lifetime of service to our university, to our country, and a career of service that also began at K-State, if you know the president's background and biography. So it was a privilege to be part of that. And so take 30 seconds just personally to say thank you from me, but also I know from alumni for everything you've done for K-State over the last 5 years and throughout your career. And as we come to a close today, just throwing the floor to you to share your thoughts on serving in this role for your alma mater as that time comes to a close, and thinking about K-State going forward, but also your reflections on your time in the seat.
Well, I'll keep it real short. It's been a real privilege and honor to serve my alma mater in this particular role. I never thought that was not on my bucket list anywhere. That's my ignorance, I guess. If I'd known how much fun this was and how important it was, it had probably been on my bucket list. But I hadn't even thought about it until they asked me to be the interim. And even then, I hadn't thought about it very long. I wanted to go back to where my family was headquartered, and that's kind of in Northern Virginia. But this has been such a fulfilling experience. I cannot describe to you how fulfilling it is. And part of that fulfillment comes from the faculty we work with, our students, our staff, alumni, those that support us, the corporations that support us. I mean, every time you meet with any of these folks, you come away inspired. And the nobility of this mission of higher education, which is the one way, especially at a land grant, where we try to provide access to everybody that's capable of this level of work, so they can improve their circumstances and the circumstances of their family. So this is a really noble mission. We ought to be proud, everybody proud of their land grant heritage here, and I think we are. And I'll tell you, making the decision to leave sometime around the first of the year was bittersweet. And I still have moments where I think, did I do the right thing? But given age and given length of time here and so forth, it seemed like the right thing to do. It was a heart and brain thing. My heart wants me to stay here forever. My brain says, you better leave, Myers. So that's kind of where we are. But what an honor. And I appreciate everybody's support, words of encouragement, to not just to me, but to our team, to our families, our spouses, our partners. What a great place. What an absolutely great place.
Well, we're grateful for your service here and more broadly, and would just say at K-State, thank you. I know from the Alumni Association, as well as all the other constituencies on campus, and surely from all the folks who are watching this, grateful for your leadership and your commitment to K-State, and your and Mary Jo's enthusiasm for the role. You may leave, and she might still kind of be here. Have you all agreed? Is this a joint decision?
Well, I thought it was, but we don't surprise each other anymore, I don't think. No, it's a joint. It was a joint decision for me to come out here. It's a joint decision for us the timing of this, and maybe sometime later. But it's probably time. I think K-State's in great position actually right now. I feel really good about where K-State is. And you heard Chuck talked about some of the brag points that we use all the time, but that our people continue to do great things for our students and for the state and for the nation. So if you don't mind, Travis, we have a couple questions in the chat. One is
We do.
about the economy. Let me just say this. Tax revenues in the state of Kansas are going through the roof. They've got, I don't know the numbers right now. They'd be off if I knew the old numbers, but we're hundreds of millions to the plus in predicted tax revenue. So somebody's doing well in Kansas because the tax revenue is way, way up. You'd hope that we get some of that in the next legislative session, for a little bit of it for higher education to continue to improve our capabilities. And then I'm sure I'm not speaking for all businesses in Kansas, but in general, business is really good here. The next question was mandating the vaccination under President Biden's executive order. I think that is still to be determined if it applies to us. I don't think we know yet. I've not heard yes or no. I've asked the question several times. Our legal folks are talking to others. I think part of that has to come from Washington, D.C., and I think we need more information. But so, as I said, we're about in the mid 60s in vaccination status for faculty, staff, and students. The community is less, frankly, and that's important. If another strain descends on us, we'll be better off perhaps than the community, and we all live together. So it's important we be cheek by jowl in this. But I don't know about the vaccination. I don't know about the requirement to do it. If we're required to do it, of course, if that's the law, we'll do it.
Got it. Appreciate that. And all your responses, President Myers, Provost Tabor, Amy Button Renz from the Alumni Association. Thanks to all three of you for making time to give everybody an update. We had hundreds of people on today, and we know that lots more will be able to grab this on YouTube in the future and get an update on happenings at K-State. So thanks to the three of you very much for doing this again. And thanks to everybody out there who joined us today. We appreciate it. And go Cats. Thanks so much.
Go Cats, beat Oklahoma.